Part 2. How do we repair the damage done by modern partisanship? Start by doing what's necessary. Then do what's possible, and suddenly you are doing the impossible. Francis of Assisi. Thesis 22. A candidate for political office can only accept campaign funds from individual citizens qualified to vote for them. In the realm of political governance, the integrity of the electoral process stands as the cornerstone of democracy. It is imperative that those seeking public office remain beholden to the interests of their constituents, rather than being swayed by the influence of special interest groups or corporate entities. This principle is underscored by the historical precedent that has shaped our understanding of democratic governance. Throughout history, we have witnessed the pernicious effects of undue influence on political candidates. From the days of ancient civilizations to the modern era, instances abound where the allegiance of elected officials has been compromised by the allure of financial support from powerful entities. Such influence undermines the fundamental tenets of democracy, eroding public trust and subverting the will of the people. Post-Civil War to the early 20th century. The Civil War's aftermath saw political parties increasingly dependent on wealthy individuals like Jay Cooke, the Vanderbilts, and the Astors for financial support, a trend exacerbated by the lack of a civil service system. The first federal campaign finance law emerged in 1867, aimed at Navy Yard workers, but it was the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act of 1883 that broadened these restrictions to all federal civil service workers, pushing parties toward corporate and individual wealth for funding. The election of 1896, with Mark Hanna's systematic fundraising from the business community for William McKinley, set a precedent for modern campaign financing, including commercial advertising. Following McKinley's assassination, Theodore Roosevelt's presidency initially fought against corporate influence, but ultimately turned to wealthy backers for support, leading to calls for reform and the proposal for public financing and disclosure of campaign expenditures. 20th century reforms and challenges. The Tillman Act of 1907 marked the first significant federal effort to restrict corporate contributions to political campaigns, albeit with limited enforcement. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 and its amendments in 1974, in response to the Watergate scandal, established a more robust framework for campaign finance regulation, including the creation of the Federal Election Commission. However, the Supreme Court's decision in Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976 struck down spending limits as unconstitutional, complicating reform efforts. Despite various legislative attempts in the 1980s and 1990s to address campaign finance issues, significant reform was elusive until the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, also known as McCain-Feingold. This legislation sought to eliminate soft money contributions and regulate electioneering communications, but faced significant constitutional challenges, including the landmark Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission decision in 2010, which significantly altered the landscape of campaign finance by allowing unlimited independent expenditures by corporations and unions. What are the modern implications and continuing debates? In the landmark case of Citizens United in January 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent political expenditures by corporations and unions. The court's decision was grounded in the belief that the free speech rights apply not only to individual citizens, but also to associations of citizens, including corporations. This ruling overturned previous decisions that allowed for the prohibition of corporate spending on election-related communications, affirming that the First Amendment does not permit the government to limit political speech based on the speaker's identity. As a result, corporations and unions can now spend unlimited amounts on advocating for the election or defeat of candidates, though direct contributions to candidates or political parties remain prohibited. The evolution of campaign finance in the United States from the Jacksonian era to the present day reflects a complex interplay between democracy, corporate power, and regulatory efforts. Each phase of reform has sought to balance the need for political expression with concerns over undue influence, leading to a continuously shifting legal and political landscape. The ongoing debate over the role of money in politics remains a pivotal issue, with the Supreme Court's decisions playing a crucial role in shaping the boundaries of campaign finance law. To safeguard the integrity of the electoral process, given the modern Supreme Court that views the Constitution through a textualist lens, it is essential to separate money from speech and restrict campaign contributions to individual citizens who are qualified to vote for the candidate through a constitutional amendment. This action will uphold the sanctity of democratic representation and ensure that elected officials remain accountable to the electorate rather than beholden to special interest. It will prevent wealthy donors and corporate entities that are outside the arena from wielding disproportionate influence over the localized electoral process and government. This will promote fairness in political participation and make our political leadership less susceptible to the pressures exerted by outside donors seeking to advance their own agendas. This will foster a democracy where every voice carries equal weight and every citizen has an equal opportunity to engage in the political process, which will bolster public confidence in the integrity of the political system while also enhancing the legitimacy of elected representatives. Thesis 23. A candidate for political office should be limited to how many years they can serve to ensure the public benefit is not compromised by the power accumulated for their self-benefit. Throughout history, civilizations have grappled with the challenge of balancing stability with the need for periodic renewal in leadership. Ancient Athens provides a compelling example where the rotation of officials through strict term limits was instrumental in fostering a vibrant democratic ethos. By preventing the entrenchment of power and promoting the active participation of citizens, term limits played a pivotal role in maintaining the vitality of Athenian democracy. In the early history of the United States, George Washington set a critical precedent by voluntarily limiting his time in office, underscoring the importance of avoiding the concentration of power. Washington's decision to step down after 2 terms was a powerful statement that the presidency should not become a position of indefinite rule. This concept of limiting executive power was not initially extended to representatives in Congress, who were seen as less susceptible to the same risk due to their collective nature and frequent elections. However, in the modern political environment of the United States, the dynamics have shifted significantly. Today, representatives wield much more power and are able to utilize the resources of their positions to gain an elevated advantage over challengers. This entrenched incumbency, combined with hyper-partisanship and a growing disconnect between public desires and legislative action, has led to widespread disillusionment with Congress. Congressional approval ratings remain consistently low, while the re-election for incumbents is remarkably high, suggesting a need for reform. The concept of term limits has garnered significant attention as a possible solution to these issues. Proponents argue that term limits could introduce fresh perspectives, curtail the dominance of career politicians, and mitigate the influence of big donors and special interests that currently dominate the political landscape. By rotating representatives and ensuring that no individual holds office for too long, term limits could foster a more dynamic and responsive legislative body, better aligned with the needs and the desires of the American people. The drawbacks of career politicians. Career politicians, those who have turned their service in Congress into a long-term profession, present a significant challenge to legislative efficacy and responsiveness. The increasing tenure of members of Congress contrasts sharply with the broader American workforce's median tenure of just over 4 years. This disparity underscores the problem. Congressional members often prioritize re-election efforts, and donor interest over public service and legislative problem solving. Financial imperatives in congressional campaigns. Campaign financing plays a pivotal role in congressional elections, with the top spenders winning a significant majority of races. The reliance on campaign contributions from big donors and special interests not only diverts time and resources from legislative duties, but also skews priorities toward those with the means to influence election outcomes rather than the general public's welfare. Incentives for partisanship and short-term focus. The current structure fosters a political environment where partisanship and short-term thinking prevail. The necessity to secure re-election and the influence of special interests create incentives for members of Congress to focus on immediate gains, partisan bickering, and blame shifting rather than addressing long-term national issues and engaging in more bipartisan cooperation. The promise of term limits. Term limits could fundamentally alter the incentive structure in Washington by removing the perpetual cycle of re-election, thereby cutting the ties to big donors and special interests. Without the pressure of securing future campaigns, politicians might prioritize genuine public service, encouraging bipartisan collaboration and a focus on long-term solutions over short-term electoral gains. Term limits could usher in a new era of governance marked by a diversity of experience, fresh ideas, and a return to civility as members of Congress view their roles as temporary public service rather than lifelong careers. Ultimately, term limits offer a pathway to revitalize American democracy by ensuring that power truly resides with the people through representatives who are more focused on serving their country than preserving their political careers. The imperative of imposing term limits on political office holders resonates deeply with the foundational principles of democracy and governance. History serves as a poignant reminder of the perils associated with unchecked tenure in office, where power accumulation can lead to complacency, corruption, and the erosion of public trust. Therefore, the institution of term limits emerges as a vital mechanism to safeguard against those threats and uphold the integrity of democratic governance. Thesis 24. The source of income received by political candidates or office holders must be fully disclosed. The imperative of ensuring full disclosure of income by political candidates and office holders cannot be overstated, as it lies at the heart of maintaining the integrity and accountability of democratic governance. Throughout history, clandestine financial dealings and undisclosed sources of income have been synonymous with corruption, eroding public trust, and undermining the legitimacy of political systems. Therefore, implementing stringent disclosure requirements is not just desirable, but essential in upholding the principles of transparency and ethical conduct in politics. Drawing upon historical examples such as the enactment of the Lex Julia during the reign of Julius Caesar in ancient Rome, underscores the enduring importance of transparency in financial matters. This legislation, which mandated public officials to disclose their financial interest and income sources, serves as a testament to the recognition of transparency as a cornerstone of responsible governance. By learning from these historic lessons, modern democracies can appreciate the critical role of income disclosure in fostering public trust and preventing abuses of power. In contemporary context, scandals like the Panama Papers have laid bare the consequences of financial secrecy in politics, exposing the potential for corruption and unethical behavior when financial dealings remain concealed. By contrast, comprehensive income disclosure requirements serve as a bulwark against such abuses, providing citizens with vital information to hold their elected representatives accountable. When voters are empowered with knowledge about the financial interests of their leaders, they can make informed decisions and demand greater transparency and accountability in government. Moreover, income disclosure acts as a vital tool for preventing conflicts of interest and ensuring that elected officials prioritize the public interest over their own personal gain. By shedding light on potential financial entanglements, disclosure requirements help mitigate the risk of corruption and unethical behavior among political leaders. This transparency not only strengthens public trust in government, but also reinforces the democratic principle that elected officials are accountable to the people they serve. Thesis 25. Elected members of Congress must not partake in a retirement plan. They should receive Social Security like the rest of us. Ensuring that elected members of Congress are not enrolled in a separate retirement plan, but rather rely on Social Security like the rest of the citizenry, is a crucial step toward promoting fairness, accountability, and empathy in governance. Throughout history, examples abound of political leaders who prioritize the interests of the people they serve over personal privileges, thereby setting a precedent for selfless leadership and public service. Consider the case of Cincinnatus, the revered Roman statesman and farmer who relinquished absolute power after just 15 days to return to his humble life. By voluntarily surrendering authority and eschewing the trappings of wealth and privilege, Cincinnatus epitomized the ideal of a citizen leader committed to the welfare of the Republic. His example serves as a timeless reminder that elected officials should prioritize the common good above personal enrichment. In modern times, the spirit of selfless leadership is exemplified by figures like President Harry Truman, who, upon leaving office, chose to decline lucrative offers and instead lived modestly on his pension. Truman's decision reflected a deep-seated belief in the principles of equality and humility, demonstrating that elected officials should lead by example in matters of financial stewardship and ethical conduct. Furthermore, the exclusion of elected members of Congress from a separate retirement plan aligns with the fundamental principles of democratic governance. In a system where representatives are meant to serve the interests of the people, it is essential to avoid creating a class of political elites insulated from the financial challenges faced by ordinary citizens. By relying on Social Security like their constituents, elected officials are more likely to remain attuned to the needs and concerns of the broader population. Moreover, the absence of a separate retirement plan for members of Congress serves as a safeguard against conflicts of interest and undue influence. When politicians are not beholden to special interest or corporate donors for their retirement security, they are better positioned to make decisions based solely on the merits of the issues at hand. This fosters a more transparent and accountable political system where elected officials can prioritize the public interest without fear of reprisal or undue influence. Thesis 26. End the practice of dividing the congressional chambers along party lines and have all state delegations sitting together in both legislative houses. Fulfilling this thesis is a crucial step toward fostering unity, bipartisanship, and effective governance. Throughout history, examples abound of the detrimental effects of partisan division on legislative productivity and national cohesion, underscoring the need for a more inclusive and collaborative approach to lawmaking. Consider the case of the early United States Congress, where political factions were often deeply entrenched and bitterly divided along ideological lines. This partisan gridlock frequently hampered legislative progress and hindered efforts to address pressing national issues. The bitter debates over issues such as slavery and tariffs culminated in a sectionalism and ultimate civil war, highlighting the dangers of unchecked partisan animosity. Similarly, in more recent times, the hyper-partisan atmosphere in Congress has led to legislative paralysis, government shutdowns, and a growing sense of disillusionment among the American people. The practice of seating members along party lines has only served to exacerbate this polarization, fostering an us versus them mentality that undermines cooperation and compromise. In contrast, seating members of Congress by state delegation promotes a spirit of cooperation and encourages lawmakers to prioritize the common interest of their home state over nationalized partisan politics. By fostering relationships across party lines, we create an environment that helps facilitate dialogue, consensus building, and the pursuit of pragmatic solutions to complex challenges. Moreover, seating members of Congress by state delegation reflects the principles of federalism and representative democracy upon which the United States was founded. It ensures that each state's interests are adequately represented and empowers local lawmakers to work collaboratively. Thesis 27. If the Senate maintains a filibuster rule, then the actual filibuster must take place and must adhere to the subject of legislation under debate. The filibuster, initially designed to safeguard minority interest and encourage robust debate, has undergone a significant transformation over time. Originally, filibusters required senators to engage in lengthy speeches to stall or block legislation, serving as a tangible expression of dissent and a mechanism for negotiation and compromise. However, in the past 50 years, the filibuster has been increasingly abused as a procedural tactic, detached from its original purpose. Senators now merely signal their intent to filibuster, bringing legislative proceedings to a halt without engaging in substantive debate. This misuse undermines the democratic process, allowing minority factions to wield disproportionate power without constructive engagement. To address this issue, it is crucial to amend the filibuster rule to mandate genuine filibusters that relate directly to the legislation under consideration. Requiring senators to actively debate on the Senate floor reinstates accountability and encourages meaningful dialogue and negotiation. By restoring this accountability mechanism, the filibuster can once again serve as a check on majority power while fostering compromise and consensus building. This proposed reform aligns with historic precedent, echoing an era when senators engaged in principled debates to advance their positions. By reintroducing this requirement, the Senate can restore public confidence in its ability to govern effectively and uphold democratic norms. Thesis 28. End the practice of omnibus bills. Any bill must pertain to one subject only, and that subject should be in the title. The proliferation of omnibus bills encompassing multiple disparate provisions within a single legislative package undermines the fundamental principles of transparency and accountability. This practice often leads to opaque decision-making, as lawmakers may be compelled to support or oppose entire bills based on an individual provision unrelated to the bill's primary purpose. To illustrate the significance of this issue, one can look back to the founding principles of legislative governance. The framers of the Constitution envisioned a deliberative process where each piece of legislation was scrutinized on its own merits, ensuring that lawmakers and the public could fully understand and assess the implications of proposed laws. However, the advent of omnibus bills has deviated from this intent, allowing for the inclusion of unrelated provisions that may bypass thorough scrutiny and debate. Furthermore, the use of omnibus bills has historically been associated with instances of legislative overreach and political maneuvering. By bundling unrelated measures into a single bill, lawmakers may seek to obscure controversial provisions or circumvent opposition, thus undermining the democratic process and eroding public trust in government institutions. The first major omnibus bill enacted in the United States was the Compromise of 1850, which had 5 disparate provisions designed by Senator Henry Clay of Kentucky. His purpose was to pacify sectional differences that threatened to provoke the secession of the slave states. The Fugitive Slave Act was the most infamous of the 5 compromise components and was almost universally excoriated by abolitionists, the chief exception being Senator Daniel Webster of Massachusetts, who prioritized preservation of the Union. Senator Thomas Hart Benton, a Missouri slaveholder, opposed the Omnibus Compromise as an unmanageable mass of incongruous bills, each an impediment to the other. While this bill did not pass as the official Compromise of 1850, it got the ball rolling. To satisfy members of Congress, Stephen A. Douglas separated the compromise back into 5 separate bills and got it passed. Ultimately, disunion and civil war were delayed for a decade. Interestingly, it was the 1861 Constitution of the Confederate States that first attempted to ban omnibus legislation, requiring that every bill shall relate to but one subject and that shall be expressed in the title. Since the Congressional Budget Act of 1974, omnibus budget bills have become the norm, streamlining multiple appropriations into one package. However, this approach poses serious risks to legislative clarity and financial prudence. Congress has only managed to pass its appropriations on schedule 4 times since then, often delaying even the preliminary budget blueprint. The comprehensive size of omnibus bills leaves little time for detailed examination, allowing for the inclusion of unrelated or contentious policy riders. The necessity to approve the bill in its entirety also forces legislators to endorse items they may not support to avoid being blamed for potential government shutdowns. Such practices compromise the democratic process, restricting debate and the chance for amendments, and facilitate fiscal recklessness by concealing spending increases and pet projects, diminishing public oversight and accountability. This corrupted process makes it almost impossible to rein in the budget deficit, as legislatures are incentivized to include funding for their personal pet projects. Thesis 29. The Electoral College should not be party appointees nor winner-take-all. The Electoral College, as it stands today, has been a cornerstone of American presidential elections since the founding of the nation. However, its partisan nature and the winner-take-all system employed by most states have led to various criticisms and serious calls for reform. Transitioning to a nonpartisan and proportional system could address many of these concerns, fostering a more equitable and democratic electoral process. Importantly, the Electoral College remains vital for electing a president of a federalized republic, where the states are the voting members, but it must be reformed to better serve its purpose. A primary critique of the current Electoral College is its susceptibility to partisan manipulation. In most states, the winning party secures all the electoral votes, which can disproportionately amplify their victory. This system often marginalizes voters from the minority party within a state, effectively silencing their electoral voice. A nonpartisan approach to the Electoral College, where electors are chosen based on their qualifications and commitment to represent the electorate rather than party allegiance, could help mitigate this bias. By focusing on the integrity and impartiality of electors, the electoral process would better reflect the true will of the people rather than the strategic interest of political parties. The winner-take-all system creates significant disparities in representation. Candidates tend to focus their campaign on a few battleground states, neglecting the majority of the country where the outcome is more predictable. This leads to an uneven distribution of campaign resources and political attention, undermining the principle of equal representation. A proportional allocation of electoral votes, where each candidate receives votes corresponding to their share of the popular vote in each state, would ensure that every vote matters. This system would compel candidates to engage with a broader spectrum of voters, fostering a more inclusive and representative electoral process. The current Electoral College system can result in a president elected without winning the popular vote, as seen in several recent elections. This discrepancy between the popular vote and the Electoral College outcome undermines public confidence in the democratic process. A proportional system would reduce the likelihood of such disparities by aligning electoral votes more closely with the national popular vote. This alignment would enhance the legitimacy of the election outcome and reinforce the democratic principle that the presidency should reflect the choice of the majority of Americans. A nonpartisan and proportional electoral college could also encourage political moderation. The winner-take-all system incentivizes candidates to adopt extreme positions to secure their base in swing states, often leading to polarization. Contrast, a proportional system would reward candidates who appeal to a broader electorate, promoting more moderate and consensus-driven policies. This shift could help bridge the partisan divide and foster a more cooperative political environment. Finally, a nonpartisan and proportional electoral college would promote national unity. The current system often exacerbates regional divisions, as the focus on swing states can make voters in solidly red or blue states feel neglected. By ensuring that every vote contributes to the overall electoral outcome, a proportional system would encourage candidates to address the concerns of all Americans, regardless of their state's political leaning. This inclusivity would strengthen the sense of national unity and shared purpose. Despite its flaws, the Electoral College is still vital for electing a president in a federalized republic where the states are voting members. The founders designed the Electoral College to balance the influence of populous and less populous states, ensuring that all states have a meaningful role in the election process. This system acknowledges the federal structure of the United States, where both the national and state governments share sovereignty. By maintaining the Electoral College, we preserve the principle that the presidency should be decided not just by a direct national popular vote, but through the collective will of the states as distinct entities. Reforming the Electoral College to make it nonpartisan and proportional does not mean abandoning the institution. Instead, it means refining it to better fulfill its intended purpose in a modern context. By addressing partisan biases and the winner-take-all system, we can enhance the Electoral College's ability to fairly and accurately reflect the electorate's will while preserving the foundational role in our federalized republic. In conclusion, transitioning to a nonpartisan proportional Electoral College would address many of the shortcomings of the current system. It would mitigate partisan bias, enhance fair representation, reduce electoral disparities, encourage political moderation, and promote national unity. Importantly, it would do so while preserving the essential role of the states in our federal system, ensuring that the Electoral College continues to serve as a cornerstone of American democracy. Theses 30, 31, and 32. The Senate and the House must return to their original role of checks and balances with each other. For the Senate and House to check each other, the legislative branches must have different constituencies. Repeal the 17th Amendment so the Senate can return to its original constitutional role as representing state governments. The framers of the Constitution designed the Senate and the House to serve different purposes. The House, with its frequent elections and smaller districts, was meant to be directly responsive to the people. The Senate, with its longer terms and original election by state legislatures, was intended to represent state governments and provide a stabilizing influence. The Great Compromise of 1787 was a pivotal moment in American history that established a framework for the bicameral legislature. This compromise resolved a deadlock between larger states, which favored representation based on population, the Virginia Plan, and smaller states, which favored equal representation, the New Jersey Plan. By creating the House of Representatives with representation based on population and the Senate with equal representation for each state, the framers ensured that both populous and less populous states had a balanced influence on federal legislation. This structure allowed the Senate to act as a check on the more directly responsive House, fostering balanced and deliberate lawmaking. Today, both the Senate and the House are elected by popular vote, leading to increased partisan polarization. Senators who once acted as representatives of state interests now often prioritize nationalized party agendas over state-specific concerns. This shift has contributed to legislative gridlock and politicization of process, such as the confirmation of Supreme Court nominees. The 17th Amendment, ratified in 1913, changed the election of senators from state legislatures to direct popular vote. While this change aimed to reduce corruption and increase democratic participation, it fundamentally altered the Senate's role in representing state governments. Instead of removing the state's role in selecting senators, the amendment should have clarified how each state was to select its respective senator, so there is a uniform method of selection that is responsible and accountable to their respective state constituencies. I personally feel the senator should be appointed by the governor and approved by the state legislature. If the state legislature fails to act within a certain period of time, then the appointment will stand. Before the 17th Amendment, senators were accountable to state legislatures, ensuring that state interests were directly represented at the federal level. For instance, during the debate over the tariff of 1828, known as the Tariff of Abominations, senators advocated for state economic interests, balancing demands of industrial and agricultural states. This balance helped maintain the Union's economic stability and highlighted the Senate's role in protecting state sovereignty within the federal system. The direct election of senators has shifted their focus from state-specific issues to national political trends and party loyalty. This shift has diminished the Senate's effectiveness in checking federal overreach and maintaining a balance of power between the states and the federal government. The politicization of the Senate's advice and consent role in judicial nominations reflects this broader trend. Senators now prioritize partisan considerations over nuanced deliberation and state interests, contributing to a more polarized and less functional legislative process. By reestablishing distinct roles for the House and Senate and ensuring that the Senate represents state interests, Congress can better fulfill its constitutional responsibilities. This approach would lead to reduced political gridlock and stronger representation of the diverse interests that make up the United States. Thesis 33. The districts of members of the House of Representatives should be reduced in size to reflect a closer connectivity with the people of the district. In the early years of the United States, the House of Representatives was designed to be the branch of Congress closest to the people. The original ratio of representatives to constituents was approximately 1 to 30,000, allowing representatives to maintain close connections with their constituents. This proximity fostered a strong sense of accountability and responsiveness. Over time, as the population of the United States has grown, the size of House districts has increased significantly. The Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929 capped the number of representatives at 435, leading to larger districts as the population grew. Today, each member of the House represents an average of approximately 760,000 people, a far cry from the original ratio. The large size of contemporary districts has several negative consequences. Representatives find it increasingly difficult to maintain direct contact with constituents, and the sheer number of people they represent makes it challenging to address individual and community-specific concerns. This disconnect can lead to a sense of disfranchisement among voters and perception that their representatives are out of touch with local issues, and a lack of trust in the political process. Reducing the size of representative districts can also help mitigate the issue of gerrymandering by increasing the number of districts, thereby making it more challenging to draw boundaries that systematically favor one party. With smaller districts, the demographic diversity within each district tends to be less pronounced, reducing the ability to manipulate boundaries to create safe seats for a particular party. This leads to more competitive elections and representatives who are more accountable to their constituents as a whole, as the impact of gerrymandering diminishes with the increased difficulty of strategically designed numerous small districts to achieve a particular political outcome. The United States is in the top 10 countries with the highest percentage of constituents per single representative. This list includes Indonesia, Brazil, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, European Union, India, and China. Not normally the type of democracies we like to be compared to. To pour salt in the wound, we are the third highest in the world. Our closest European allies that have the most populated democracies, England, France, and Germany, have between 95,000 to 115,000 persons per representative. The previous point leads us to the common concern that increasing the number of representatives would lead to a less functional House of Representatives. However, this is not necessarily the case. A larger House could enhance deliberation and representation by bringing in a more diverse array of voices and perspectives. Historical examples from other countries with larger legislative bodies, such as the United Kingdom's House of Commons, 650, and Germany's Bundestag, with 735 in 2024, demonstrate that larger legislatures can function effectively and efficiently. Advances in technology and modern communication methods can facilitate the functioning of a larger House. Digital platforms and tools can streamline legislative processes, improve communication among representatives, and enhance transparency and accessibility. These tools can help manage the increased number of representatives and ensure that the legislative body operates more smoothly. Increasing the number of representatives could also help mitigate extreme partisanship, especially if incorporated the other policy initiatives in this chapter. With more representatives in the context of the other reforms, the influence of any single party or faction is diluted, leading to more coalition building and compromise. This environment can foster a more collaborative and less polarized legislative process. So, reducing the size of House districts and increasing the number of representatives, I believe, is a crucial step toward enhancing the connection between representatives and their constituents and ensuring effective governance. A larger House would not necessarily lead to dysfunction. Instead, I believe it would enhance representation, facilitate more comprehensive deliberation, and mitigate partisanship. Thesis 34. No elected official can leave elective office and work in any position of influence, like Board of Trustees, or be employed as a lobbyist with a 501c4 for a period equal to his or her time in office. The wisdom of Thesis 34 is self-evident in its potential to reduce corruption and conflicts of interest within the political class. Here are just some examples of how the revolving door between elected office and influential positions has corrupted our politics. Number 1, conflicts of interest. Example: former Congressman Billy Tauzin, who played a key role in passing the Medicare Modernization Act of 2003, left Congress to become the head of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. This act was highly beneficial to the pharmaceutical industry, raising concerns about whether his legislative actions were influenced by future job prospects. The impact? Such moves can create conflicts of interest where officials may make decisions that benefit their future employers rather than the public. Number 2, undue influence and access. Example: after leaving office, former Senator Chris Dodd became the chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America. His transition exemplifies how former lawmakers leverage their connections and knowledge to influence policy in favor of specific industries. Impact: this revolving door can lead to former officials having undue influence on current lawmakers, effectively allowing special interests to shape legislation and policy. Number 3, erosion of public trust. Example: former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor lost his re-election bid and shortly thereafter took a high-paying job with a Wall Street investment bank. His swift move to the private sector raised questions about whether his legislative actions were influenced by potential job opportunities. The impact? Such career transitions will erode public trust in elected officials, as constituents will believe that their representatives are more interested in lucrative post office careers than in serving the public good while in office. Number 4, policy decisions favoring special interests. Example, former Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney, who served as CEO of Halliburton before his tenure in government, was criticized for the company's significant contracts during the Iraq War, which some argued benefited from Cheney's former connections. Support work to U.S. military operations and U.S.-funded reconstruction projects made up to $2.1 billion of the company's $5.5 billion of revenue in the first quarter of 2004. The contracts also contributed $32 million of operating profit to Halliburton, which was run from 1995 to 2000 by Vice President Dick Cheney. Impact: the perception or reality that policy decisions are made to benefit former or future employers rather than the public will undermine the integrity of government actions. Number 5, legislative capture. Example, many former legislators become lobbyists, such as former Senator Trent Lott, who became a lobbyist for various industries after leaving office. This can lead to legislative capture where the interests of a few outweigh the needs of the many. Impact: legislative capture can result in policies that disproportionately favor wealthy corporations and special interest groups rather than the broader population. By implementing a cooling off period equal to the time served in office before allowing former officials to take positions of influence, this thesis helps mitigate these issues. This would reduce conflicts of interest, decrease undue influence, restore public trust, promote fair policymaking, and prevent legislative capture. It's time this deplorable process is ended. Thesis 35. Citizens of the Republic should be governed more by the government closest to them. Thesis 36. The state government is the closest government to the people due to its comprehensive constitutional authority, legislative power, regulatory oversight, and direct accountability to residents through elections and governance. The principle that citizens of the Republic should be governed more by the government closest to them, namely their state government, is rooted in the ideals of federalism and the belief in localized decision-making. This notion underscores the importance of accountability, responsiveness, and tailored governance to meet the unique needs of diverse communities. However, over the course of U.S. history, there has been a notable shift toward increased federal control over areas traditionally managed by states, such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This shift has introduced several challenges and potential detriments to the political and social fabric of the nation. Given the vast local complexity and diversity of the United States, state-level governance is not just preferable, but necessary to effectively govern such a large nation through democratic methods, local accountability, and responsiveness. State governments are inherently more accessible and accountable to their residents compared to the distant federal government. Local officials are often members of the community, directly experiencing the issues they govern. The proximity fosters a sense of responsibility and responsiveness. For instance, state governments can quickly address local crises, such as natural disasters, with tailored responses that reflect the immediate needs of their citizens. This direct line of accountability ensures that elected officials are more attuned to their constituents' concerns and can be swiftly held accountable through local elections and civic engagement. Policies tailored to local needs. The United States is a vast nation with a remarkable diversity of cultures, economies, and social norms. States possess the unique ability to craft policies that reflect their specific cultural, economic, and social context. For example, agricultural states can prioritize farming subsidies and regulations beneficial to their local communities, while more urban states might focus on public transportation and infrastructure. This flexibility allows for more effective and relevant policymaking. A one-size-fits-all approach, often necessitated by federal governance, can overlook the distinct characteristics and needs of different states, leading to inefficiencies and dissatisfaction among residents. Encouragement of innovation and experimentation. The concept of states serving as laboratories of democracy is a cornerstone of American federalism, but the notion has been corrupted into the idea that states can experiment with novel policies and programs on a smaller scale as preparation for nationwide adoption. Massachusetts healthcare reform in 2006, which later served as a model for the Affordable Care Act, exemplifies this principle. Such experimentation fosters innovation and allows for a diversity of approaches to solving problems, which should be studied and emulated by other states if successful, but which should not serve as an excuse for the federal government to take one state solution and impose it on the remaining 49. Expansion of federal power in state responsibilities. The United States has experienced significant shifts toward federal control over areas traditionally managed by states, often in response to national crises or perceived inefficiencies in state governance. Education. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 expanded federal involvement in education, imposing standardized testing requirements and accountability measures on states. While aimed at improving educational outcome, it often disregarded local educational priorities and needs. Healthcare. The Affordable Care Act of 2010 significantly increased federal oversight of health insurance markets and Medicaid. While the act aimed to expand healthcare coverage, it also imposed federal standards that sometimes clashed with state-specific health needs and priorities. Infrastructure. Federal transportation funding and regulations have increasingly dictated state infrastructure projects and often come with stipulations that may not align with local needs or preferences. The expansion of federal power often results in the imposition of federal mandates that disregard local priorities and needs. For instance, the No Child Left Behind Act imposed standardized testing requirements on all states, without consideration for the unique educational challenges and priorities of each state. This loss of local autonomy can lead to policies that are ineffective and even harmful in certain contexts. The expansion of federal agencies and regulations creates a more complex and cumbersome governmental structure. This increased bureaucracy can result in slower responses to local issues and an overall decrease in governmental efficiency. State and local governments, which are closer to the issues, are better positioned to act. When policies are made at the federal level, it becomes harder for citizens to hold specific lawmakers accountable for decisions that affect their daily lives. This dilution of accountability can lead to voter apathy and a sense of disconnection from the political process. In contrast, state and local governments provide more direct channels for citizens to influence policy and hold their representatives accountable. Federal regulations often result in one-size-fits-all policies that do not account for the diverse ecological and economic conditions across different states. For example, environmental regulations that are suited for one region may be overly restrictive or insufficiently protective in another. This lack of flexibility can lead to suboptimal outcomes and increased tensions between state and federal authorities. The historical shift toward greater federal control in the U.S., while sometimes necessary, has led to a loss of local autonomy, increased bureaucracy, diluted accountability, and one-size-fits-all policies that will not serve the best interests of our diverse communities. Given the vast local complexity and diversity of the United States, state-level governance is essential to effectively manage such a large nation through democratic methods. By emphasizing state-level governance, the U.S. can return to a more balanced federalist system that respects the unique needs and preferences of its varied populace, ensuring a more effective and representative democracy. Thesis 37. Services to the citizenry's well-being should be the primary responsibility of the state. The notion that services to the citizens should be the primary responsibility of the state is deeply rooted in the traditions of the American federal system. This principle emphasizes the importance of localized government in addressing the diverse needs of communities across the U.S. Over the past half-century, however, there has been a significant shift toward increased federal control over areas traditionally managed by state governments, such as primary education, local health care, and mental health services and welfare. This shift has led to various challenges and arguably a deterioration in the quality of essential services. Historical context and federalism. The United States was founded on the principles of federalism, where power is divided between national and state government. This division was intended to allow states the flexibility to address their unique needs and priorities, fostering innovation and responsiveness. Historically, states have been responsible for services directly impacting the well-being of their citizens, including education, healthcare, mental health services, and welfare. This localized approach ensured that policies and programs could be tailored to the specific cultural, economic, and social context of each state. Primary education. Deterioration due to federal control. Over the past several decades, federal intervention in primary education has increased significantly. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 is a prime example. While well-intentioned, NCLB imposed standardized testing requirements and accountability measures on all states, regardless of their unique educational challenges and priorities. This one-size-fits-all approach often overlooked the distinct needs of local schools and communities. The increased focus on standardized testing has led to a narrowing of the curriculum, with schools emphasizing test preparation over holistic education. This has resulted in reduced emphasis on subjects like history and civics, which are crucial for an informed citizenry, as well as art, music, and physical education, which are important for the overall development of students. When states are responsible for primary education, they can develop policies that reflect the specific needs of their students and communities. Their ability to tailor educational approaches to local needs has resulted in better outcomes for students. Local health care. Deterioration due to federal control. The Affordable Care Act of 2010 significantly increased federal oversight of health insurance markets and Medicaid. While the act aimed to expand health care coverage, it also imposed federal standards that sometimes clashed with state-specific health needs and priorities. States lost some of their autonomy in designing healthcare programs that best suited their population. Impact on healthcare quality. Federal regulations often fail to account for the unique healthcare challenges faced by different states. For example, rural states with large, sparsely populated areas have different healthcare needs compared to densely populated urban states. The imposition of uniform federal standards can lead to inefficiencies and gaps in healthcare delivery, particularly in areas that already struggle with access to medical services. Benefits of state responsibility. States that retain control over their healthcare systems can develop innovative solutions tailored to their specific challenges. For example, Vermont's single-payer healthcare initiative and Oregon's Medicaid reform efforts demonstrate how state-level control can lead to effective and innovative healthcare solutions. These states can address unique local healthcare issues more effectively than any distant federal bureaucracy. Mental health services. Deterioration due to federal control. Mental health services have also seen increased federal involvement, particularly through Medicaid and other federal programs. Federal funding is essential to maintain current access to Medicaid, but the strings attached to this funding can limit the flexibility of states to design and implement mental health programs that meet local needs. The lack of flexibility often results in a mismatch between the services provided and the actual needs of the community. For instance, some states might require more resources for community-based mental health services, while others might need more inpatient facilities. Federal oversight can lead to a one-size-fits-all approach that fails to address the local variations effectively. The impact of Reagan tax cuts on mental health services. The mental health services landscape in the United States experienced significant changes following the Reagan administration's tax cuts in the 1980s. Prior to this period, federal funding played a crucial role in supporting state-run mental health programs, which had become heavily dependent on federal financial assistance over the preceding decades. The Community Mental Health Act of 1963, for example, had established a robust framework for federal support, leading to the creation of numerous community mental health centers across the country. These centers relied on continuous federal funding to provide essential services. However, the Reagan administration's tax cuts, part of a broader agenda to appropriately reduce federal spending and shift responsibilities to the states, resulted in substantial budget reductions for various social programs, including mental health services. The federal government's support for these programs dwindled significantly, leaving states to fill the financial gap. Unfortunately, most states were not prepared to replace the lost federal revenue with their own funds, leading to a decline in the availability and quality of mental health services. States grappling with their own budget constraints struggled to maintain the levels of care and support that had been established under federal funding. The reduction in resources led to the closure of many community mental health centers, reduced services, and a growing number of individuals with mental health issues not receiving the care they needed. This period marked a significant setback for mental health care in the United States, with many of the gains made in the previous century being eroded due to the abrupt withdrawal of federal financial support. The long-term effects of these changes are still felt today as the mental health system continues to face challenges in providing adequate care to all who need it. In my home state of South Carolina, the sprawling 160-acre campus of the mental health facility, locally known as Bull Street, with its hundreds of thousands of square feet of space, was turned into a political football between the governor and the Department of Mental Health over which entity had the right to sell off the property and benefit from the millions of dollars that will be derived on the liquidation of almost 180 years of investment. With that debate settled, the property has now been turned into a neighborhood of luxury apartments and retail stores anchored with a minor league ball field. Not surprisingly, small businesses, residents, and shoppers in downtown Columbia are challenged by the large numbers of homeless with mental health issues scattered throughout the city with nowhere else to go and no family able to advocate for them. Conclusion: the tradition of state responsibility in providing services for the citizenry's well-being is a cornerstone of the American federal system. Over the past half-century, the shift toward increased federal control over primary education, local health care, mental health services, and welfare has led to various challenges and deterioration in the quality of these services. By reaffirming the primary responsibility of states in these areas, the United States can ensure more effective, responsive, and tailored solutions that better meet the diverse needs of its citizens. Re-emphasizing state control in these critical areas aligns with the foundational principles of federalism and can lead to a more effective and representative government. Thesis 38. Hearings by legislative committees should only be shared publicly through transcripts and in video recording except for security purposes. Public hearings by legislative committees are a cornerstone of democratic governance, providing a platform for transparency, accountability, and thorough fact-finding. However, the modern practice of video recording these hearings has increasingly shifted the focus from genuine investigation to social media theatrics and political grandstanding. This essay argues for the necessity of requiring full attendance by committee members and limiting the dissemination of these hearings to transcripts except for security purposes. This reform would enhance the integrity of legislative processes, reduce politicization, and ensure that hearings serve their intended purpose of uncovering the truth and crafting effective policies. The problem with current practices: social media and fundraising exploitation. The widespread availability of video recordings has transformed legislative hearings into opportunities for political performance rather than serious inquiry. Elected representatives often use these platforms to deliver sound bites tailored for social media, aiming to boost their visibility and fundraising efforts rather than engage in substantive discussions. This shift detracts from the original purpose of hearings, which is to gather facts, analyze information, and make informed decisions. A common issue in current legislative hearings is the tendency of representatives to attend only the portions relevant to their questioning. They arrive for their turn, deliver prepared remarks or questions, and then leave, missing the broader context and the insight shared by other participants. This behavior undermines the collaborative nature of the hearings and leads to fragmented understanding and less effective legislative outcomes. Benefits of requiring full attendance and transcripts. Ensuring comprehensive engagement. Mandating full attendance by committee members would ensure that all legislators are present for the entirety of the hearings. This requirement would foster a more collaborative and comprehensive approach to fact-finding, as representatives would hear all testimonies and discussions, gaining a complete understanding of the issues at hand. It would also hold legislators accountable for their participation and engagement in the legislative processes. Reducing politicization and grandstanding. Limiting the dissemination of hearings to transcripts would significantly reduce the opportunities for political grandstanding. Without the visual and emotional impact of video, representatives would be less incentivized to use hearings as platforms for social media theatrics. Transcripts provide a more neutral and factual recording of proceedings, encouraging a focus on substance over style. This shift would help restore the primary purpose of hearings, to investigate issues thoroughly and impartially, enhancing legislative effectiveness. With full attendance and a focus on detailed transcripts, legislative committees would likely become more effective in their fact-finding missions. Legislators would be better informed, having heard all testimonies and discussions leading to more nuanced and well-rounded policy decisions. The reduced emphasis on performance would also encourage more thoughtful and productive dialogues among committee members and witnesses. Addressing potential concerns. Transparency and public trust. One might argue that limiting video recordings could reduce transparency and public trust in the process. However, this concern can be mitigated by ensuring that transcripts are comprehensive, easily accessible, and promptly published. Detailed transcripts would still provide the public with a clear record of proceedings, maintaining transparency while removing the distractions of visual media. Security considerations. Video recordings should still be allowed for security purposes to ensure that there is a visual record in case of any disputes or incidences during the hearings. This measure would maintain a balance between security needs and the reform's objectives. Conclusion: reforming the practices of public hearings and legislative committees to require full attendance by members and limiting dissemination to transcripts is a necessary step to restore the integrity and effectiveness of these important processes. The current exploitation of hearings for social media attention and fundraising undermines their primary purpose of fact-finding and informed decision-making. By implementing these changes, we can ensure that legislative hearings remain focused on uncovering the truth and crafting policies that genuinely serve the public interest.